Wow, check this out. All right. So I've never done this before, using my iPhone 6 to try doing an Facebook Live. It's my second time doing Facebook Live. This time I'm taking it outside to make it a little less boring. I'm on a walk, gonna go get some coffee. This is Rich on Money. I'm gonna try to make this a lot faster than the last time I did my Facebook Live. I talked for about 30 minutes last time. This time I'm gonna try to condense this and talk about everything in like 10 minutes. So I wrote I wrote a post on my blog, and I published it just last night, and it's about appreciation, and something I've been thinking a lot about lately. But I wanted to summarize all of that kind of in a video in about 10 minutes. That may let some of you decide whether you want to go ahead and read the blog post, or it might be enough info for you to sort of take what's in that and use it. So with appreciation, kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about was a lot of people will invest, in real estate in certain cities, and I'm seeming to see this problem maybe as more of a serious problem in cities that are a higher cost of living. And they will, invest in a city and realize, they'll kind of tell people like, well, maybe I'm not making a lot of cash flow with my property right now, but that's okay because I'm planning on making a lot of money in appreciation. So like they're happy not making any cash flow or even losing money, but because they're in a city like San Francisco or Honolulu or DC or some other city, they're thinking, if I make a lot in appreciation, that's fine. I'll make up for it later. That can be a very dangerous, that can be a very dangerous way of thinking in investing in real estate. I think that having this idea that certain cities are good for appreciation, or that you can, sort of use your crystal ball or read the news or talk to your buddies and decide this is a great location that's going to appreciate over the next several years, can be a losing proposition. That's kind of like, playing the stock market and trying to decide which stocks are going to shoot up. Even though some cities seem like they do better appreciation-wise, that isn't always the case. And so I kind of illustrated that in this blog post by talking about what happened with my house in Washington, D.C. And I talked about how I bought that house in Washington, D.C. for $280,000 I bought that house for $280,000 in 2003. And then a couple of years later, I guess it was like maybe 2 years later, that house was already worth $400,000. So, wow, that house is now worth, now it's gone up 42% in 2 years. Well, that's totally awesome. I mean, that's a 42% gain in 2 years, from appreciation. That's amazing. Like, that's why people want to invest in these big cities. That's the big money that everybody's always talking about. Just imagine, I've only had this house 2 years. Just imagine what it'll be worth in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years if I hang on to this house. Like, I'll be rich. So that's kind of the attitude that I had. And I tried to buy a bunch more houses in DC. But the prices are rising so fast, I chickened out. I didn't buy any more. The bidding wars are getting too crazy for me. So fast forward, I sold this house 11 years later. I say 11 years later from 2005. So remember, bought for $280,000, 2 years later, $400,000, 42% gain. Then sold it 11 years later. What did I sell it for? I sold it for $400,000. Well, wait a second. I thought it was going up like 10, 20, 30, 40% every year. How could I possibly, in the next 11 years, not go up at all? Well, I mean, it probably went up and down a certain amount every year, but the net of that up and down over the next 11 years was zero gain. Now, obviously, we went through that financial crisis, and that real estate bubble. But we came out of that and, went several more years into the future. And the net was a zero gain for me. So if you do the math, in a big city like that, starting in 2003 and ending in 2016, I made less than 3% per year in appreciation. And that is not great. I mean, that is not an amazing rate. You could do much better in the stock market. You could do much better with your money doing lots of other things. And so I think my point is there, when people talk about appreciation as an amazing way to make money in real estate, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. It has a lot to do with timing that is not necessarily always under your control. And that's just something that you have to, consider and you have to think about. Now we'll talk about somebody else. We'll talk about, it says I'm live right now, but I don't see a counter. I don't see a timer. I'm not sure if this thing's working correctly. Like, am I even doing this right? I hope I'm doing this right. Shouldn't there be a timer that shows how long I've been recording? Oh, I'll keep talking. And hopefully I'm doing this right, and I'll hit finish, and we'll kind of see what comes out of it all. It says I'm live right now. So I'm going to talk about Doug Nordman, my friend Doug Norman, who bought 2 properties over sort of his career and sort of his, not just career, but after he retired in Hawaii. And he's a real estate blogger who blogs at themilitaryguide.com, and he's a good friend of mine. I want to use his properties in Hawaii to illustrate kind of how things work with appreciation. And it may be an even more famous appreciation market of Hawaii with his 2 properties that he bought and sat on for a while. And then let's see how he did with appreciation, if he did any better than I did. I would assume he would in a place like Hawaii. So let's see. So he bought, he's on 2 different properties, and he bought one. It's on my in my blog post, but he bought one of his first property for, I think, $277,000, and it was like 27 years ago. And then today that property is worth $750,000. And he's sunk like a bunch of money into it, and he's had to do lots of sweat equity, and it's been tons of work. And not only that, but it's been a very poor rental property, only 3 or 4% cap rate, which is pretty bad. But that's what you should expect in a city like in a sort of high cost of living city. So he's only made like 3%, a 3% appreciation rate if you kind of average it out on what it's been over that amount of time. Not very good. So there's kind of another lesson there. And then on his second house, which is a beautiful house that I've got the chance to see, and when I stayed with him in Hawaii, he bought that one for $450,000. Again, he sunk tons of money into it, tons of his own sweat equity. Goodness gracious, I think he spent like $120,000 adding an extra room onto it, and he put his own like solar panels onto it that would retail for $30,000, and redid all the bathrooms, and the place is gorgeous now. It's a premium property. I believe when he bought it, it was a complete mess. So bought it for $450,000, I think 17 years ago, and I believe it's worth $1,033,000 now. You do the math, and you subtract out the massive amount of money that he put into it himself, the $120,000 and the $30,000 for the solar panels. And again, he's at 3-point-something% per year appreciation in Hawaii. Okay, these are places that have, sometimes Hawaii will appreciate 30% in a year, and then 20% the next year, right? And then 4 or 5% the next year, and then everybody's like, oh my God, you're going to be rich if you, buy anything in Hawaii. But what you don't hear about is what the next 8 years looks like. So that's just kind of the lesson that I wanted to share about appreciation, is that it's not always as cut and dry as people would like to believe. It's iffy. You never know when and where these big spurts of appreciation are going to happen. And you don't know if they're going to continue, for a long period of time, or if they're going to end quickly, like they did for me, in DC, when it was just that 2-year time spurt where I got that 42% rise. And then it just stopped. And so it's like playing the stock market, and you can't count on it. You can't plan on it. You certainly can't plan your financial future around appreciation. That's why my lesson to you today is invest in real estate for cash flow first. You got to make sure you have cash flow for sure in a real estate deal. It's a pretty cool place here. I like to spin around. I'm in South Korea, just going to get a cup of coffee. Make sure that you have cash flow first. If you don't have cash flow, then don't buy it. So you've got good cash flow out of a deal. All my properties have very good cash flow. Good cash flow. If those properties happen to make appreciation, that's just gravy on top of your cash flow. And then you're double rich. Good for you. If they don't make appreciation, you're still making money because you've got the cash flow. You can't flip that around. You can't not worry about the cash flow and hope for appreciation that may or may not happen. And that's kind of my big lesson for everybody today. And if you want to kind of dig deeper into this, it's a little bit more in depth than my blog post that I just published on richonmoney.com. Be sure to subscribe to that website if you haven't done so yet. And thanks for listening.